now what about when you have negative numbers or a combination of positive and negative numbers? Will the associative property of multiplication still hold true? Well, let's talk about negative 3 times parentheses negative 7 times negative 4. Now, negative times negative is equal to positive. I explained why this is the case in a previous set of videos called Multiplying and Dividing Positive and Negative Numbers, and hopefully the link to that previous set of videos is in the description of this video. So that means that negative 7 times negative 4 is equal to 7 times 4. Now, negative times positive is equal to negative. The negative here is negative 3, and the positive here is 7 times 4. Now, we already explained the associative property of multiplication for positive numbers, so we can know that 3 times parentheses 7 times 4 is equal to parentheses 3 times 7, and that times 4. Now, positive times negative is equal to negative, and negative times negative is equal to positive. So we end up with negative 3 times parentheses negative 7 times negative 4 is equal to parentheses negative 3 times negative 7, and that times negative 4. So the associative property holds true when you have a negative number, another negative number, and another negative number. So we just explained that negative, 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 that combination works for associative property of multiplication. And previously we explained that positive, positive, positive also works. But what about for other combinations of positive and negative numbers? Does associative property of multiplication still hold true? Well, I went through each other combination of positive and negative numbers, and the associative property of multiplication still holds true for these as well. Let's now talk about when you include 0. Let's suppose that one of those 3 numbers, or maybe 2 of them, or all 3 of them, is 0. Will the associative property of multiplication still hold true? Let's talk about 3 times parentheses 0 times 4. Now 0 times anything is equal to 0, so 0 times 4 is equal to 0. 3 times 0 is equal to 0, so this means that 3 times parentheses 0 times 4 is equal to 0. Now let's talk about parentheses 3 times 0 and that times 4. Well, 3 times 0 is equal to 0, and 0 times 4 is equal to 0. So 3 times 0, that in parentheses, and that times 4 is equal to 0. Because 0 is equal to 0, we can now know that 3 times parentheses 0 times 4 is equal to parentheses 3 times 0, and that times 4. Let's now talk about including 0 using the same pattern we used in the previous slide, but let's now use variables, use algebra. Suppose that A, B, and or C is equal to 0. So we're talking about this specific case where you're including 0. Then A times parentheses B times C must equal 0. Additionally, parentheses A times B and that times C also is equal to 0. Because 0 is equal to 0, therefore A times parentheses B times C is equal to parentheses A times B and that times C. Thank you for watching this video. Here's a link to the playlist about the associative property of multiplication in which this video is a part of. Feel free to click on this link.